it's taken years to get to that point and be like, I can never blame the culture on anything. I can just look at my life and my actions and wonder how it got from point A to point B.
Worst gig ever with your host Geoff Garlock on Revolver. Oh.
Street by street, block by block, me and Berdan are taking it back. Welcome to Worst Gig Ever on Revolver. I'm your host, Geoff Garlock. This is the podcast where we talk to musicians about how terrible it is to be a musician. Terrible shows, terrible lives doing those shows, and this one is no exception. I've got my old friend, Michael Berdan. He is from the band Uniform. I've known him for a very long time. Many phases, and we talk about all those phases. We get into what it was like back in Philly. We get into, of course, the two of us talk, and it's going to go to horror and the state of the world. And I think it's a great talk, and I hope you do too. So keep on listening, and also make sure you go check out any of our old episodes if you haven't yet on Revolver, and also at worstgigeverpodcast.tumblr.com. All of our old episodes are up there. But for now, get into it. Earth Crisis is better than anything. Maybe not. So usually we start with a worst gig. Whatever your one, doesn't have to be the best one. It could be anything. It could be job related. Could be band related.
This is going to get really existential.
Good. What I expect out of you, Berdan.
Yeah, right. There are tiers to worst gig, and there's like spiritual soul crushing. There is like equipment malfunctions. There's like getting in fights with people in the crowd. There's like you're just bad at this. There's also I'm playing a show and it's going well and people are responding, but I'm like almost 40 and I look out and wonder what I'm doing with my life, and that like all I have is this like Johnny Carson-esque stupid human trick that I've now tried to make into something that I can make a living on.
Right.
And
as Judd Apatow says, this is 40.
It is, man.
Apparently.
And like you're sitting there, you're like, man, like, I wonder when my life's going to happen. And you're like, oh shit, my life's happening. And
yeah, this is it.
It gets kind of weird. But anyway. So, I mean, in that regard, every gig could be kind of like a worst gig. But,
as you get older, every gig becomes a worst gig.
Yeah, I have really bad knees, man.
Yeah.
But I would say worst gig in recent memory, when Ben and I started Uniform in late 2013. We had worked on a number of projects together up until that point. We'd become, like, at least in our minds, like somewhat seasoned in what we do. And immediately got to thinking that we were kind of like too big for our britches, right?
Always a good way to start a band.
So like, we have this practice space. We write these like two very long songs that were not very good.
Right.
But of course, because we made them, we thought that they're fantastic.
If the audience is too dumb to get it, fuck them.
Nah, man.
Because they're wrong, probably.
They're wrong because I'm great at what I do, right? And this is what I'm saying to myself at the time.
Yes.
Ben's saying it to himself at the time. We're both just cocky.
Yes.
And so we book a show at Nothing Changes, Sneaky Sneakers in store, and we're nice enough to have us. And we bring our own PA because the Home Sweet Home PA just couldn't handle the fucking the the power monster
Right.
that we were gonna
Pulsating rhythm you will provide.
We're gonna change your life, you know,
Right.
like you're like your ears are gonna bleed and you're gonna fucking hate it, but like you're gonna hate it in the way that you're supposed to hate it because
Right.
like, you know, we're fucking artists. Anyway, we bring our PA. It sounds loud and stupid during sound check, but it's cool, you know.
Right.
It's like the kind of loud and stupid that we want.
Right.
We brought a friend of ours to do sound, who's like, you know, a somewhat seasoned like sound engineer. Everything's like, all right, cool. Like this is just gonna be pushed to the limits. It's gonna be great. During our first fucking 10-minute too long song,
Of course.
we get a minute and a half in before the smell starts to kind of overtake us. And we look back and our PA is on fire.
Perfect.
The PA that we brought is smoking and there are flames.
It couldn't take how powerful and great this song was that you had written. You were right.
I mean, there's that, or it just rejected the song as we should have.
Right. It was the proper critic.
Yeah. And then the guy who we had doing sound, who was also like daisy chaining it through the Home Sweet Home system, he was very drunk, and he was just sitting back there going,
Perfect.
making motions, and we
Perfectly set up to do the one job that he has.
yeah. So like our 20-minute set, you know, wound up being like a 7-minute set or something.
Right.
And most of that 7-minute set was just like, oh shit, like this is on fire.
Right.
And like people standing around going like, I guess.
Might have been like
like-
a early boredom's early eye thing you were doing.
I mean,
Like, you know, oh, are they going to bring a backhoe in? No, they're just bad at setting up PAs.
yeah. But I mean, this is what happens. It reminded me of when I was like, 16 in my first band, and we all just like thought that we were fucking great, you know.
Oh my God,
like,
yeah.
Coming out and like covering Chokehold and Earth Crisis,
Yep.
and like, we're gonna blow fucking minds.
Wait,
like,
what Chokehold and Earth Crisis songs? If you
God.
can remember. If
I can.
Prison of Hope?
No, we covered More Than Ever. And we covered Firestorm.
Perfect. It's a crowd pleaser, baby.
Yeah,
Nothing like questionable lyrics
Really?
about welfare generations.
You don't think about it at the time.
It's weirdly
it's like,
something I wrote down as like in something to talk about with you, where it's like there are bands that I still love Earth Crisis. Like I listen to them surprisingly consistently, but it is like a lot of the stuff. I mean, there's so much stuff, especially in hardcore, and especially that era of hardcore that we cared so much about. That like in retrospect, like even at the time, I thought it was questionable, but like. There is something very odd about these 16-year-olds from Syracuse using the term welfare generation. And even if they couch it in like, oh, it's about the Black Panther movement, it's just like, oh, it's kind of racist what you're doing. And basing an entire record about Gomorrah, where I'm like, oh, so Sodom and Gomorrah, so you're kind of pulling into one of the most like kind of like stories used to promote homophobia out of the Bible as a way to prove like, oh, we just don't drink. Like, what a weird thing. It's the same as like, I remember we had Larissa from Venom Prison on once, and we were talking about the co-opting of the word rape in especially hardcore, but like especially like a lot of the music maybe like both of us trafficked in of like listening to, like where it's just like, yeah, like talking about the rape of Mother Earth is also kind of denigrating to the power of what a harsh reality that is, especially coming from a bunch of white 16-year-old to 18-year-old men, like in 1994 to 1997. It's really rough. Like, there's a lot of things like that I'll go, and every time I listen, it's so hard with Firestorm being one of the greatest hardcore songs to me ever, because it's nothing but chunk and mosh. Who doesn't want chunk and mosh?
It's also fun. It's funny because I remember the first time I saw Earth Crisis, probably 1993 or so, and this is gonna like 93 or 90. No, it wasn't. It was 94. And I remember someone going around the crowd handing out a printout of the lyrics to Agnostic Front's Fascist Attitudes.
Perfect.
And reading this and going like, well, what? And that guy wound up getting beat up.
Right.
It's funny. I have a lot of Earth Crisis were. I hesitate to call them a complicated band because they're very much not. They're like meathead, hyper-conservative, pro-life jerks. But then I think actually some of them might be cool now.
Well, so that's the thing. Like, I really love Sect.
Yeah, I think so.
Who's with
Sect
Chris
really
Colohan, and Chris is the most progressive.
Yeah. Also,
so I'm just like, oh, maybe something's got to be given here. Like
the original singer from Earth Crisis was this guy Shane Durkee, who is like a cryptozoology guy, and like. He's cool. I've known him for a while.
I mean, also weirdly, musically, there's also, as an old man, no getting around that. I once read that they are all upset with how his voice sounded on Destroy the Machines, but love how it sounded on Gomorrah's Season Ends. So I was like, oh, I guess we just have different ideas of what good is. So always, even if I talk to them, I'd be like, oh, we're going to have a clash. I mean, I remember when they did that like DVD where they went to Japan, and I was just like, that ain't cool. You can't be running around wearing kimonos. Like, this is like YouTube bullshit, like before YouTube bullshit, and that's just straight up racist. Well, it's the questionable parts of Jackass that make me feel weird when I'm like, Jackass is the funniest thing that's ever existed to me.
It's fucking great. Now, bringing it back to this.
Yeah.
I haven't thought about Earth Crisis in fucking years, so it's very strange that we're talking about this like this. But
it's frustrating how much I think about them.
It's worth going into. So I believe it was University of the Arts in Philadelphia. It might have been somewhere else. Anyway, Sean McCabe from like Ink and Dagger, Credits a Cult, got on stage or like did something where I wasn't there, but there was something where like he like threw yogurt at
classic
Carl,
story,
or he like got on stage in a fur coat, like. Some shit happened.
Which is also a crazy part because that story, so like this is also the changing, not to derail, but the changing of the times where like in my mind that was like a story we all knew. The world of hardcore knows that story. Yeah. And now I'm like, maybe people don't know that story. Like that was a universal.
It was a universal story.
At one point.
Kind of like when we were texting yesterday and you mentioned Agna Moraine's autobiography.
Oh,
and like we like I automatically knew what you were talking about because if you're talking about that band, you have to be talking about the Worms.
But the correction, not Agna Moraine's autobiography you're talking about. So we're just two friends in talking. Rent America. It's come up on this.
Oh my God! They had the split.
Yes.
Agna Moraine.
Agna Moraine's autobiography was post Constantine Sankathy. I hated their 7-inch because it just was recorded so terribly. But Rent America
was the one who fell on the ground screaming about the Worms,
who are now members of Face Down and Shit, like maybe Windhand, actually.
Interesting.
Like at least one member of that at one point used to play shows, and they have one famous show that showed up on a message board that you and I used to frequent a fair amount, board.crucial.org.
Yes.
Shout out to Snickerbutt.
Yeah.
But it was that they played one show where they freaked out, crying up, and they started screaming, but what about the Worms?
Yeah.
Because we were paving over the earth.
And
people couldn't help but laugh.
Worms. And then...
Which is the ultimate of, like... That era of hardcore was so dumb. The world we came from might have been really stupid.
Fast forward not too many years.
Yeah, perfect.
And Chad, the singer from Puritan, who went on to play on Hassan Isaba and then like ultimately in the Otis Sonic.
Yep.
He and I had a band together for a very short period of time.
Did not know that.
The late 90s. It was very bad, and it didn't last for very long. It was with Kerry Joe from Makara, who was his partner at the time, and Rudy from Rudy from the Otisonic, who R.I.P. was my roommate at the time, recently passed away. Hope he's doing well wherever he is. But anyway, he put out Rent America, Agna Moraine's autobiography split.
Yes.
That like. The card stock on it was really weird. It was never really in any stores, and it didn't get around at all. And he gave me multiple copies, and I remember the front of it, the title of the split was "This One's for the Worms," and at the time I didn't know about the Worms story, and so like when the Worms story came about, it was very profound to me, and I went and I asked Chad about it, and he's like, people are just fucking dicks. They don't understand the way. Like, he was very pro Worms.
Like, I get the point of the story. It's I get the ethos behind it. Like, I get I think we all. That's the thing is like we probably all get the idea of like, yes, mankind is taking over the earth. We are paving over nature, etc.
Yeah.
The hard part, and that was also sometimes the hard part, and maybe we can even go into that, thinking about especially like the Philly scene where you came from and everything, but like the non-recognition of the absurdity of it all. Like the fact that like when I say all, literally I mean the entire world is absurd.
Yes.
But the fact, like the unrelenting lack of humor that would come across even in labels I was associated with. Like Ebullition was like humorless, but I also was a lot of times like, Kent is very funny. Why is he hiding it behind? But in like the Mountain Collective, like all these various labels that existed in those years, there was a self-seriousness that took over, and that existed in the scene of that type of world, and that made also a lot of times for me these feel like worse gigs. Like
absolutely, and like at the time
not wanting jokey bands. On the other hand, I never cared about jokes in music, but just being aware that, like, the Bill Burr-ness of it, of just, like, I think everything's stupid, but also I'm an idiot as well.
I mean, it's one of those, like, you had, like, your Adam and his package, or your Judd, or, like, whatever, who were, aware of what they were doing, and, like, it's hyper-ironic.
Right.
Like, oh, I'm covering the Misfits on a Casio. Like,
right.
Cool. But I remember at the time reading, X number of Why Vegan pamphlets or whatever Brian from Catharsis was putting out with Crime Think. And
I remember Earth Crisis passing out multiple how to monkey wrench things, and the guy being angry because he was like, oh, you can't take all of them. Could you maybe photocopy and distribute too? I go, yeah, sure. I'll do that, buddy. Never did it.
I mean, at the time, I felt bad because I felt like I should have been more into it than I was.
Sure.
It's like my friends, the people who I was looking up to, were all like, took like everything having to do with like, using the dialers on the payphones and like the Greyhound bus scams and all the Kinko scams. They took it very seriously and they like lived and died by it. And like this, the way that you guys are pulling these scams, the way that you guys kind of talk about communal living, the way that you guys kind of like weirdly celebrate your whiteness through like by saying that like if you're poor and like you're miserable, you're doing it wrong.
Right.
That was a quote that I think that went around for a bit. That
sounds very crime thinky.
It was, and I recently heard that he addressed that and like recanted it and had like through like 20 years of reflection,
right?
Gone and said like I was wrong,
right?
And that's important. Like
you can't be Ian MacKaye and be like, I still stand behind guilty of being white. Like, just be fine with just like, yeah, I was 16.
Yeah, I mean,
I had a wrong version of like a version that was not as nuanced as it should be of the fact that I was in a predominantly African American school. Like,
man, there were songs that I wrote maybe a little over 10 years ago, and like we're in the same age group. I was in my late 20s. I should have known better.
Yeah,
and it's easy for me to be like, oh, a different time, like like the mid aughts or whatever. But like I look back on things that I said, things that I did, and like especially things that I put in songs and line notes, and I'm fucking appalled. It's like that's not the human being that I want to be. And it's like, it's like I'm there in like liner notes to a record, like wearing like a Death in June shirt with a Totenkopf, and that's like, say whatever about Death in June.
In my mind is the Berdan uniform of 10 to 15 years ago.
Yeah. And like,
because that's just how I knew you. Like, that was your day to day.
I dressed like that for years.
Yeah.
And like, fact, and I still dress the same way, but I'm more choosy about like the imagery that I put on my body. And like, we can get into. I'd rather not get into the fucking nuance about Death in June. I don't care about Death in June. 100%. Like, whatever. Fact of the matter is,
there's so much more interesting than Death in June at this point.
I don't fucking
right.
Right. Okay, how about this? 2018 isn't the time for Death in June. That's
exactly.
But the fact of the matter is, never was there a time for someone wearing a Totenkopf on their fucking shirt who doesn't mean it a certain way.
Right.
And at the time, I'm like, I'm thinking that I'm ironic. I'm thinking that I can explain this. I'm really fucking like, I'm really subverting things. And like, I wonder how many times I was on the train and there's like, so like some Jewish person or some like black person or like otherwise privatized person who's like looking at this fucking like jerk off white guy in his fucking Totenkopf shirt because like they don't know what the fuck Death in June is.
Right.
They just see like this thing, and I look back on that. I look at the liner notes. I look at all the fucking pictures of me from that period of time wearing that and saying the shit that I said, and like, I'm grateful that I'm not who I was 15 years ago.
Right.
But that came with like a lot of unlearning, a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, and at times I would have liked to have put that on other people and put that on the culture at large for like, hurting me. What you're putting me down, you're putting me in the corner, you're putting like you're tearing down like my system. This is just fucking
you're marginalizing
me. Like the fucking
the white guy.
The 6 foot tall white dude.
Cisgender white male.
Yeah, like poor me. You don't understand my fucking art. Dude, fuck my art.
Right.
And it's taken years to get to that point and be like, I can never blame the culture on anything. I can just look at my life and my actions and wonder how it got from point A to point B. It's never shit that's being done to me.
Right.
It's the shit that I'm doing and the shit that I'm putting into the world. And that's like, like at that point in time, I put that into the world, and I'm like, I look back and I just fucking shake my head.
Yeah. Does it put a weight on what you create now with Uniform? Like, not in that you have to do a reaction to it, or is it just enough that it's just like you're just aware enough of who you are now that like, because I think sometimes that can be, not to have any specific examples, but can be like exhausting as well if you're like trying to overcorrect for that in music.
That's the thing. It's like, I don't want to fucking like try to live in penance,
Right.
It's like, I think
because it's not like you're coming from, in my opinion of knowing you for a very long time, it's not like you're coming from like a world of like, any time I listen to, I want to say 99% of black metal musicians who try to vaguely defend some dumb thing that they were like, I put the word Aryan on my record, and it's just like some weird reasoning that I'm just like, just be better at explaining yourself slightly. You're getting it's the same Louis C.K. stuff. Like honestly, like it's just like deal with like give me at least I was an idiot completely.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't care about your persona that you thought like using Jew as something was like a valid term, no matter if it's cultural or what.
Exactly. I never want to ever say like, well, actually. I never want to tell somebody how they're supposed to feel about some shit that I made.
Right.
And when it comes to like, like content in Uniform now, of course it's informed by my life and my experience. But, here's the thing. I still am like a cis white male of a certain, like, in a certain age bracket and a certain economic bracket. Like, everything is still fucking handed to me. I was hanging with some friends, Control, the synth shop up the road, and they were talking about how one of their customers was complaining about not being able to get booked because he's a white guy and right now
book always
it's like, man, like I'm fucking I'm booked for God knows how long. Like, just because there's a more even playing field doesn't mean that like you're put down or that like that you're getting less. And so I'm going on tangents here.
That's mostly what this podcast is.
All I feel that like I really need to do, and it's an important thing to just constantly try to keep in mind, is like how the thing that you're putting into the world might affect people.
Right.
And when somebody says that like something impacts them negatively, believe them and don't question their reasons for it.
And at the very least have a moment of being like, oh, I should think about why. Like, you might not agree with it because you might be at some point in your life, like whatever it is.
No,
but
totally. And like, you know, I don't think of myself as some like, you know, like woke ass dude. Like, I think of myself as someone who is consistently trying to be less of a dickhead than he was yesterday.
Yeah, which is a great plan to have. If only 94% of the humanity would do that. But
yeah, and straight up, I fucking fail at it.
Yeah,
like a lot. Like, you know, in the past year, I've, you know, I've gone from like patting myself on the back, thinking like, you know, like how like good and honest I am like all of the time with everyone, to like, you know, in like some like professional ways fucking things up, in some very personal ways like really fucking things up and really hurting people.
Right.
And like, you know, and like that's shit that like weighs on me, and it's like, oh, well, why do I feel fucking guilty? It's like, because you're supposed to.
Right.
And that guilt will hopefully fucking propel you to not do the same shit, to not treat people like anything less than you want to be treated.
Right.
And
I would like to think, in my idea, like in my surprisingly positive view, that like I would like to think coming out of the world we came out of, at the very least, in all the absurdity of the ridiculousness of it all, set me up because I was willing to be set up to be in that position now.
Yeah.
Like, set me up so, like, especially now that we're in a position where it's like, no matter what, we got Trump as a president, we got Gavin McInnes is a nightmare that will not escape, and God, like, he's the reason we almost weren't on Vice, and there were many other reasons we shouldn't have been on Vice. But, like, I think, like, being in that world and being inundated with, like, no matter if people were not, like, the concept of straight edge veganism, anti-misogyny, anti-racism, like Antifa, like like the idea of situationist, the idea of any other movement, the idea of all that stuff, like, inform me to be at the very least, like, not in a like, oh, I'm proving I'm better than everyone else, but that I'm set up now when it's a lot harder as like a 40-year-old to just be like, let me just at least be conscious of what I've done wrong today.
Totally.
Like, ideally.
I mean, dude, Gavin McInnes is such a fucking, like, apt example of, like, everything I never wanted to be, you know? And, you know, he's someone who was...
Irony that's not irony that has become... He's careful of what you pretend to be.
Yeah. And, like, you know, he's someone who was in the punk periphery, if not immediately in there, in, you know, like the 2000 whatevers, and like, you know, he was like kind of like, there's no way that I didn't do drugs with Gavin McInnes.
Sure.
Like, and what happens when your ideas are challenged and are asked, and when you're asked to grow, and you fucking refuse to, and you dig in your heels, is fucking that. Yeah. And like, all it is a continuation of fucking 2005 Vice culture. He is not, that dickhead has not changed brand.
Right.
Like, the rest of the world, like, fortunately enough, like, the people that I choose to keep up with, like they have.
Right.
And
because 2005 Vice culture sucked then.
No.
As I played the shows of it over and over again.
Yeah, it was awful. And like,
it was just a lot of red stripe.
Yeah. And like, it's important to, like, to think and to, like, grow past that.
Yes.
And, I mean, you know, I know a lot of people, I've played with a lot of people, I've been close with a lot of people who have dug in their heels in certain ways and said, like, no, my art's being subjugated. Like, you don't get what I'm trying to do.
Right.
And I don't fucking talk to them really anymore.
Yeah.
Because, like, all art has the right to exist. You have the right to make whatever you want. Like, that's great. You have to fucking live with consequences of that.
Yeah.
Like, somebody calls you an asshole for, like, throwing a fucking, like, swastika on the cover of your fucking Stormfront record. And then, like,
Or like, you made Human Centipede. You're the guy who made Human Centipede. It just kind of is what it is. You made the what is the one with the whatever experiment? No, the Siberian film.
Oh, a Serbian film?
Serbian film, yeah. Like you made it. I don't know. Like, and you can do the...
Yeah, you can make it. You just, like, nobody's fucking putting you in jail for that.
Right.
Like, you're not being fucking censored.
You can make up some logic that it's a comment on blah, 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 and you're doing a... Like,
have you ever seen that movie?
No, because I don't... Like, it came right at the point where, and this kind of connects to a lot of our mutual interests, where I was just like, I think I'm done with pushing the limit movies.
Yeah.
As someone who loves horror and exploitation, but was also at the point where it's like kind of connected to all this, like thinking about music and thinking about hardcore. And we've had these discussions for a long time of like, part of the problems of those genres and things I love are part of where we're at right now as a world. And I was just like, I don't have an interest in watching some guy fuck a baby. Like, honestly.
No,
like,
totally, of course.
I didn't really before. Like, Last House on the Left is hard enough to watch.
Yeah.
For me.
There's
like,
at least a point to that.
And it's it has a point to it. I don't buy that there's a point. Like, I just don't. Like, and also I'm like, why do I want to sit through that?
No, totally.
Like, I'd rather enjoy... I'll see enough fucked up things. I have enough things that I have to already be like, what will I show my 20-month-old son? Like, it's only recently that I'm like, Christy's like, are you going to wear that Cannibal Corpse shirt as much in a month or two? I was like, I mean, he's dealt with the Halloween 3 masks and the new Halloween 2018 mask that's coming in March. Like, he laughs at it, so he's got to learn. This is what Daddy does.
Absolutely.
But it is also hard when, like, it's hard to figure out. I had a conversation with my wife the other day where I was just like, I love Italian horror films and giallos. I'm not sure I have a lot of friends at my comedy theater I would recommend. They should definitely watch Your Vice is a Locked Room. like, it just like, there's just a lot of like fucked up shit that I'm putting a bullshit, like a half bullshit lens on that it's transgressive and interesting, and half they were just kind of making a bunch of movies because Italy's laws are so crazy that you can make a billion Django's and Serpico ripoffs.
Totally. And I think that you touch on something really cool there, and something really important in that, like, you can watch this. Like, I still have like a deep affinity for fucking, like, gore cinema.
Yes.
And in many ways I identify more with horror than I do with music.
Sure.
Music just happens to be like the language that I fell in, but like in another life I would have loved to have made horror movies.
100%.
But like,
that's why I just do soundtracks for them. The Slashing in Feartown, USA on Troma DVD now.
But it's like, much like all right, so you still listen to the Fang record. Like,
right.
You don't need to wear a Fang shirt. You don't need to tell everybody why they should be listening to Fang.
Right.
You're really into fucking like Cannibal Ferox or like whatever, like Umberto Lenzi like piece of shit thing. Like it's like, and it's like, it's fine. It's cool. Like, I have my opinions on those, and I'll talk about them with like in certain company,
right?
And I'll watch them on my own,
like,
whatever. But like, I'm not gonna fucking like wear a shirt or like tell everybody like, man, like, you ever see In a Glass Cage? That's fucked up. Oh, you should see In a Glass Cage. You can't handle In a Glass Cage,
right?
Man, it's fucked up. You should like it. If you don't like it, you don't get my art.
Right.
Dude, last night there was a fucking 35 millimeter screening of Sallow at Metrograph, right?
Yep.
My partner and I were texting all day like, should we go to this? Because it's like, you're never going to see that on 35 millimeters. and her and I both hadn't seen it in like over 20 years. We're both like, we maybe like should kind of cool, but then it's like, why? Like, the only reason we would do it is to say that we did it and to like see that kind of print. But that's not a movie that you need to see more than once.
No.
And that's definitely not the kind of movie that you need to ever fucking like recommend to anyone. It's like one of those things that,
especially when you're 40 and it's like no one cares about your record collection as much as you do anymore, and no one cares about your list of movies you've seen as much as you do anymore.
Man, I don't even have a record collection anymore.
I wish I didn't. When I move, it'll be a nightmare.
But yeah, like you have to take some kind of inventory on and responsibility for what you are putting
taking
out.
In.
And like, yeah, you can have your own independent fucking, likes and interests, but like, I don't think that it's a bad thing that we're asked to think more about like what we make and how it affects other people.
Right.
I think that
it's exhausting sometimes.
Yeah, totally.
As many things are. You've heard me talk about it too many times. Anytime I got a search of if a black metal band is too National Socialist for me to deal with.
Dude.
Where I'm like constantly, I've said it maybe 50 times on this podcast, please Mugwa, don't be too fascist. Like, I love you Mugwa, but you're Polish, and I get worried sometimes.
I've gone through that so many fucking times. I've gone through that with people that I fucking know, and who I like straight up can't, and not can't, but fucking won't talk to anymore. Right. Where it was like, oh yeah, you're the fucking black metal dude, like cool, whatever. It's like, you're really into black metal. Oh, you're really into black metal.
Right.
Oh, you're really into. And it used to mean like, like say like when I was first getting into this shit in like the late '90s through like the aughts, it was like, the deeper you were in, like the deeper you were in, you're fucking authentic. You're real. You're what, and like at some point, it turned in my head like where it's like, yeah, like okay, like you might not be a Nazi, but like you hang out with Nazis, and like it's not, but like you're not a Nazi. You just have like Nazi records, and like like these sketchy records, like they're pretty okay. It's like, but you like kind of like get coffee with these dudes, but like it's all right. I still think you're cool, and like at some point it turned, and it's just like, dude, you fucking hang out with Nazis.
Right.
Like,
well, because also, if it's something based around extremity, like, that's the reason, like, the Norwegian black metal scene had to get to where it did, that became just this, like, cultural thing people love to talk about who don't even like black metal. But, like, it's, at a certain point, if everything's readily available, then you have to work harder to find the real fucked up stuff. Like, I think about two things. I think about, one, how, like, we used to have to get stuff from Blackest Heart Media, the catalog, which was where you'd get exploitation films and stuff. Mm-hmm. But that was to get, like, a copy of Dr. Butcher MD. Just, like, a slightly less edited version of Cannibal Holocaust.
Yeah.
Or I think of, like, the movie 8mm. Mm-hmm. I love the movie 8mm. If you haven't seen it in a while, it's a mess of a fucking movie. But it's about Nicolas Cage, and he's going into the depths of VHS culture to find a snuff film, and find out if snuff films really exist. And they go to, like, a extreme movie convention that's basically in a back alley where there's like barrels on fire and there's fucking steam everywhere. It's like, this is the hard shit. Honestly, everything you could find in that within 2 minutes on internet now, all I'd have to do is type in 3 keywords and I'd be like, oh, I'm watching a fucking gorilla get fisted while they're fucking bukkakied. Like, you're just like, oops, like, I didn't even mean to look at it. The algorithm sucks.
I remember buying all those creation books in the late 90s, and my favorite one was this one called Killing for Culture. And it was this heavily footnoted, like, presented as like an intellectual exercise on like the realities in death film, like which death films are real versus which aren't, which like snuff films might be real versus which ones aren't, and like it's a fairly like lengthy and involved book, and I remember reading it, and it basically said like no snuff films are real, like blah blah blah, and it's like, well, I don't know at this point, because YouTube probably begs to differ, and like,
I've watched a journalist get beheaded.
Yeah,
it's a snuff film. It
Yeah,
exists.
like,
I don't. That myth that we've created doesn't exist anymore. So that's where also like. I think we have to double check ourselves in the music we create so that we don't continue to make worse and worse worlds because we're just trying to, act like nothing's changed. Like,
yeah, and like that's the thing is like we fucking like we let shit in,
right?
Like bringing this into like kind of like around to what we were talking about, like the snuff film thing. Look at like Luca Magnotta or whatever. If anybody listens to any true crime podcasts, like you already know what that is. But like, do you think that people do this kind of stuff because they want it to be like isolated, like because they want it to be like under the radar, underground? No, they want to be fucking known,
right?
Like they feel like they're going to get recognized,
right, for
this shit. And like,
which I think speaks to something, even going back to music and pulling back, like we came from these scenes, but like, this is kind of a worst gig version to me, is the fact that like one of the hard parts of playing music is. Not to use the overused term of introvert, but I am more of an introvert than an extrovert, but it's a thing that involves having to be around people.
Yeah.
And every scene I've been a part of, I'm just like, well, I don't really love the people that are part of this scene either. Yeah. Like the hardcore scene, the Connecticut hardcore scene, like I love my friends and I love going to the shows, but at a certain point I was just like, oh yeah, this is a straight edge clique, or this is a crew, or then we get into fucking FSU and any of that, like that's a whole own thing.
Yeah.
And then the quote-unquote screamo world, that's annoying. The Vice world I was in, annoying. Horror cinema world, like I'm not comfortable at horror conventions besides the things I want to accrue for myself. Metal, the same. Most time I'm just like, I like my friends, but I don't like you because I'm not sure we're on the same page. Like, how do you deal with that when you're playing shows, when you're on the road? Like, do you have a coping mechanism knowing that you've got these same kind of, and no matter what, you're in a club, you're in a stinky club that also like stinks of stale beer, garbage, like shitty people.
It's funny because I think that like my experience with it at this point is so different from where it was, when I first started doing this. Because when I first started doing this, I was riding right along with like all of the bullshit. It was very much about like, getting wasted, getting into fights, acting out, like, just being like an asshole.
Would you say that's in Philly or New York, or?
I'd say it was in both, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, Philly's known, in my brain.
A very funny thing about Philadelphia, and like this kind of, it's funny, we never finished the Sean McCabe story.
Oh, right.
The Sean McCabe Ink and Dagger thing,
yeah.
Earth Crisis thing was that Sean, threw yogurt or fucking whatever, Carl. Anyway, I, for a very long time, had a similar haircut and a similar physique to Sean. And I would, a couple years later, I was a few years younger than him, but a couple years later, people would mistake me for Sean. And a couple of times, like, weird fucking hardline dudes, like, came up to me and were like, what the fuck? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And they're thinking that I was like
yogurt boy.
Yeah. It's like number one, I'm not nearly that talented or witty. But I wish I thought of the fucking yogurt / fur coat / like whatever shit, but like I didn't. I wasn't there.
Right.
Anyway, Philadelphia was a very violent city in the 90s, and like, warehouse culture, like Stalag 13, First Unitarian Church, Kill Time, all of that.
Capitalist Casualties, Hell Nation at Stalag, great show.
Great show.
Forced my friend to drive from D.C. to there just so we could go see that show.
I saw you guys. I don't know if you were in the.
I think I was at that Stalag show.
Yeah, but things would happen at these places. I remember seeing Burn the Priest used to play Stalag like every fucking week, right? And you're now Lamb of God, of course.
Yep.
As they got more popular, like they got like the crust kids who were originally going to see them were still coming, but then like metalcore people were coming, and like one of the last times Burn the Priest played Kill Time, this fucked up fight went down where like, you know, you have these like these people like from just another world coming in and like fucking like having weapons and beating up fucking like crusty kids with fucking brass knuckles and fucking like
mad balls.
Yep, like taking fucking chairs over people's heads, and it's like are okay, and that's just like what it was like. Dude, there were guns all the time. Like a fucking dog got shot outside of Stalag. I think at another Burn the Priest show.
Yeah.
Actually, I think that was like.
I've brought up before the show I played with Earth Crisis, and FSU came to fuck with someone in Connecticut and pulled the gun outside.
Dude,
and it was just like, I guess this is what happens when we got hate-free Earth Crisis
There
shows.
were so many fucking things. I remember somebody got shot outside of another Earth Crisis show, and then like a week later, like the guy who got shot, like I think he might have passed away. Right. But a week later, the guy who did it showed up to a Candiria floor punch show in Trenton, New Jersey, and people were mad, and they fucking chased him through all around fucking Camden, and I think they caught him. He'd broken into somebody's house to try to get away, and they broke into the house right along with him. They caught him in the middle of the house and beat the shit out of him in the house. Breakdown were playing that show too.
Of course.
So, anyway, like, and that show got canceled. There is more to that story that I will tell you in private.
Perfect.
But I can't say, because I can't say it without naming names, and it might be people who. Long story short, without naming names. That show got merged with another show, a larger show, and fights broke out at that show, and the headlining band from that show pulled a gun on the crowd. And
Bulldoze, the final beatdown.
It was not Bulldoze.
Oh man, I would have been so psyched if I had guessed Bulldoze.
But the thing with all of this is like, it seemed fucking normal. That was just like
100%.
I remember fucking at a Get Up Kids show, a fucking Get Up Kids show. Fucking people came down with bricks and were beating people with bricks.
Yeah. It's something that now that I'm surrounded mostly by norms, like comedians who like Yola Tango, maybe.
Totally.
Like where I'm like, I'll talk any little story, and I'm just like, oh, that's not normal.
Yeah.
Like, and it is the realization we've had. I think we had literally on the podcast that it's just like, oh yeah, when you look back, you forget that like. The hardcore scene, the metal scene, you basically were like, I'm going to surround myself with people that have mental illness and don't realize it because we're all coming from a fucked up place, and that's mostly the reason we're here is for that. And it's it leads to, in the end, funny stories like the yogurt and
totally.
That someone's getting beat down, and then there was a gun, and then FSU wanted to fuck with DMS, and then Courage Crew showed up, and this, and it's always like, wait, what are you talking about? I know nothing about this world.
Yeah.
And it's always was confusing to me too, because I was like, oh well, it's hard when the politics of the basement culture world I'm in is what I'm into, but also the music of this thug stuff is maybe that I like more. So where in the twain do I meet?
It's very strange. I very much, and I think a lot of people in Philadelphia did this, where like, the logic was, if you see these people beating up these people,
right,
you might as well try to be friends with the people who are doing the beating, because they're beating up everyone, and it's eventually going to get to you.
Hey,
and so
I've reached 40, and I'm not sure I've actually ever been in a real fight, and there's a reason. Like, I'm a peacemaker, except for when I make weird jokes, and I'm just charming when I make them.
I've been in lots of fights. I haven't in a number of years,
and we're all happy about that.
Not the least me. I'm thrilled that I haven't, and I hope to never be in another fight again. But like, me being in lots of fights isn't me fucking flexing my. I've gotten my ass kicked over and over. I'm not a good fighter. I was just a lunkhead, and also I was one of those people who was like trying to show up with my fucking friends, and it's like I'm this insecure piece of shit.
You had a lot to work through.
I guess I did.
As we all did. But luckily you're the one, you're one of the few who's done the work to get you to the place you are at now.
I mean, yeah,
That's
kinda.
how I look at it.
You know, straight up, I kind of talked about this like a little earlier, but like, yeah, there's still a lot of fucking work to do. I still fuck up. I still like.
The job never ends.
Yeah, no, and like it should like. There needs to be this constant awareness. You can always fucking do better. You're always gonna fucking fall down. But like, I look back and I'm like, you know, like I don't think I'm a fucking great dude. I'm not. I'm just a person. But I'm no longer living in Upper Darby, Pennsylvania, going to fucking like weird shows, trying to hang out with fucking like, you know, like people with guns for protection.
Right.
I'm no longer like getting in anyone's face to like, you know, try to like, you know, prove myself. I'm
Right.
no longer wearing shirts with totem cops on them.
Which is another good move.
That's or hanging out with people who think that that's cool. Really.
Right.
I'm no longer saying like awful things. I'm trying to actively no longer like treat people like shit, but I fucking fail at like a lot of that all of the time. And I don't know, man. Like I'm grateful that like 2018 isn't 1996 because
Right.
like, you know, people look back like, oh, like we could like you could have done so much then. We could like yeah, like PC culture was fucking annoying, but like we could do this. Like, dude, it was number one. Like all that like PC culture, like quote unquote, was like doing was like asking for you to like take some kind of stock and
Personal responsibility.
like, and like, you know, not be a total ass.
Right.
And you either, but all anybody ever really did with it was like make fun of it or try to overcompensate.
Right.
And
if you're still sitting around quoting Lenny Bruce and George Carlin nonstop, then you might as well be quoting the Bible. Like, you got that is part of the language, and the same with if we were still like welfare generations and didn't think that was weird, we would be different people.
Yeah.
End of the day, I love where you're at.
Oh,
I'm happy about that. We could go on forever.
Yes.
I know we really could go on for too
This
long.
literally could be like this could wind up going to like a fucking like a Starbucks down the street.
Exactly.
And you know.
But we have to wrap it up.
Yeah.
So the final question I always ask: what do you think of the word gig?
I don't think of the word gig. It's like, you know, it's one of those things. I think I used to kind of make fun of it because I had like a connotation with that and like the guy with like the ponytail at Guitar Center.
100%.
But now I don't care. It's like much like how like I used to get bent when people would call practice rehearsal. It's like,
Yes,
like,
I agree.
It's like, what, do you think we're in the fucking conservatory?
Yes.
We're,
Rehearsal is what I do in sketch.
Yeah.
Practice is what I do for bands.
but real talk, it's like, who the fuck cares?
I
It's a word.
know.
I like if you're getting hung up on that kind of shit. Like,
There's no hope for you.
No, you're like you cannot.
You're certainly going to be the person who's like, and now I got to change what pronouns I use.
Right,
Like within 2 seconds.
Like you cannot have a conversation with another human being if you think that the word gig or rehearsal or saying they or them or fucking any. If you're getting hung up on that kind of linguistics, you're doomed. Like just fucking don't think of the word gig. It's a 3-letter word. It does not matter. It's 100% innocuous.
I'm not going to think about it again until I ask the next guy.
Ask the next guy, and like, you know, hopefully we'll have something more insightful.
Perfect. No, I loved your answer. Berdan, I love you. This was great.
I love you too, Jeff.
Thank you, buddy.
Cool.
Bye.